Stick to what you know how to do best. That's talk into that and sign checks. Yeah. Leave the wrestling to me, Daddy.
Blanchard, up goes Blanchard.
My hard-earned tax money.
1, 2, 3, guaranteed victory.
It's always you, Brett.
Austin 316 says I just whipped your ass.
If you smell what the Rock is cooking.
I can tell you it's going to be a day that I'm never going to forget. A lot of things I want to get off my chest.
What is up? We are Wrestling Maniacs out there worldwide. I'm the host with the most, the best one, Donnie, here with
Chaz Smith. What's up? We are Wrestling Maniacs.
And this is a new series on the We Are Wrestling channel, Old School versus New School. But before we get into our topic for this first episode, if you're not a We Are Wrestling Maniac yet already, recommend you to hit that subscribe button now, turn on the post notifications, videos be coming out of nowhere like an RKO, and of course you already know, the grind is real. So Chaz, what are we going to be talking about on this first episode of Old School versus New School?
All right, Donnie. We are Wrestling Maniacs. We are going to be talking about, well, what would be better for a first episode than what got us into wrestling in the first place? Like, you know, how we became wrestling fans, how we became wrestling maniacs. So we're going to be discussing, you know, our favorite characters, favorite matches, maybe, first event, first house show, things like that. So it's gonna be pretty cool. I'm psyched. That's right. And to let you guys know as well, Old School versus New School is a series here on the We Are Wrestling channel. Chaz is an old school wrestling maniac. I'm a new school wrestling maniac. So we're going to be definitely talking about lots of nostalgia stuff from his childhood growing up into becoming a professional wrestling fan. And same goes with me, because obviously we both grew up in different eras, so this is going to, you know, create some really good discussions. Absolutely.
So, how did you first get into wrestling, Chaz?
Well, actually, you know, my uncle and my dad got me into wrestling when I was like 3 years old. I freaking I remember being like 3 years old. Literally, my uncle would be like, "Oh, body slam," and you know, he'd be elbowing me, and he, like, you know, just doing moves on me in the living room, and I just remember him watching in my grandmother's living room, and just hearing, you know, just remember hearing, you know, Vince McMahon's voice, you know, back when he was doing interviews and you know, that old powder blue WWF suit. And it just, you know, even then it just felt, you know, when I was a little bit older, even then it just felt nostalgic. It was just, I know it's weird to say that, but it just felt special, you know? And it was a really special time for wrestling. And it was the golden age. And I remember hearing the music for like the different shows, and even now I listen to just hearing the Saturday night's main event music, or like the you know, the WWF superstars, and it just hits you right in the feels, man. It's like,
I feel like a lot of old theme songs back in the day definitely like really like hit the spot. Like for me, when I hear John Cena's song come on, I am just marking the fuck out.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know what? It's like, one of the, one of the coolest things is back in the day, they used to actually use, it was before the whole thing with, you know, copyrights and stuff, you know, copyright infringements. So Vince used a lot of, if you watch a lot of early 80s WWF, they used a lot of actual songs from back then, you know, for their before, like, going into commercials and
Didn't
stuff.
Hulk Hogan used to come out to Eye of the Tiger from
That was it.
Survivor?
Yep, that was his original theme song. Yes, yes, it was. Yep. And till this day, you know, you watch a Hogan match from back then, like say Madison Square Garden, and you hear that theme come on. Their Cornette said it. Arn Anderson has said it in his podcast. So many people, Bruce Pritchard, they have never heard a pop like that in wrestling ever. Like that is just, those crowds back then, wrestling fans. And especially certain towns, like I said, Madison Square Garden, New York City, Chicago was like the mecca. It was, even though they say, you know, New York, but Chicago, you know, Illinois, a lot of pay-per-views back then were from the Rosemont Horizon, and huge wrestling fanatics. Philadelphia Spectrum. But the themes were amazing. I mean, when Jim Johnston got involved, he was just a beast. I mean, his music, even up till the 90s, was amazing.
Yeah,
You have to agree with that.
And the thing is, so like becoming a wrestling fan, I must assume, what was your first WrestleMania?
The first WrestleMania.
Because like everybody like just remembers like their first WrestleMania, like really like getting into the product.
Okay, I'll tell you what really I watched the first WrestleMania and the second. The second one, I was feeling it, you know, because they had Hogan and Bundy in the steel cage, the big blue cage, which I don't know, man. Seeing that hits me right. And oh my gosh, that cage is awesome. But
we're going to be talking about steel cage matches in the future of this series.
Definitely. So you guys definitely tune in for that. So so there was a lot of, you know, George Animal Steel versus Randy Savage for the IC belt. But for me, the first WrestleMania that I really was like, I knew like this, something was amazing, was WrestleMania 3. And I think a lot of old school fans
wasn't that the iconic video of like in the beginning Vince McMahon in like the stadium going, "Welcome to WrestleMania 3."
Yep, 93,173. Yep. And they said it was, even all the wrestlers said that it was so loud in there that you could literally just feel your skin. Like they said they could feel the electricity rising off their skin. Like it was just insane. I mean, just watching that. And that's back when WrestleMania was during the day. I remember going to my dad's friend's house and it started at 4:00. And Ricky Steamboat and Macho Man. You had Hogan and Andre, Jake the Snake and Honky Tonk Man. I mean, every match was great in that show.
So from like what you're like talking about, it seems like what really got you into professional wrestling was the iconic moments and the characters.
Yes.
Because I feel like back then, that's like what the product was more focused on, and that's what captivated the audience to start watching this sport that we love talking about.
Absolutely. I'm a huge fan of characters. I think that's a huge thing that's missing in today's wrestling. Storylines, like Macho Man and Ricky Steamboat. For instance, I remember specifically watching, it was on Wrestling Challenge and Saturday morning, and Macho Man was fighting Ricky Steamboat, and it, he took the ring bell, and came off the top rope and slammed him into the throat with the ring bell, and then he draped him over the railing and did the same thing. He hit, and then they built it up over the next few months, and Steamboat was in therapy. They showed him going to therapy because he couldn't talk, and he was like, and he was trying to. It was just they built storylines back then. It was just amazing. That's right before Pritchard came in. That was a year he came in right after WrestleMania 3, but they built that up. Same thing with Hogan and Andre. That the iconic scene of the heel turn, Andre's heel turn, on Piper's Pit with Jesse Ventura.
I do remember watching that clip.
Oh, absolutely. And when he ripped the chain off of his neck, and when he was jealous about the not getting a title shot, and saying, oh, in 15 years you never gave me a title shot, or whatever, 5 years you've been champion, you never gave me a title shot, and then him to come for him at that time, to see him out there with Bobby Heenan, it was like, holy crap. It was like, there wasn't the internet back then. There wasn't social media. So you were actually surprised. So they would have house show matches, and those didn't count. Hogan and Andre wrestled a million times before that. Not a million times, but I mean, I'm just, but they wrestled a few times. Hogan slammed Andre about probably 3-4 times before that. And, but because if it didn't happen on TV, there was a rule. If it didn't happen on TV, it didn't happen. So it was kind of weird, unless you were at a house show and saw that, but people didn't really think like that. They weren't like the social media minded, like we are now, so.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And, back then there was a lot of iconic moments and characters, and that's something, I'm very excited to talk about throughout this series here.
Absolutely.
So now how I got into professional wrestling.
Yes, sir.
Of course, I had family members who enjoyed it because I was born in 1997 when wrestling was at its highest point in wrestling with the Attitude Era. This is when WWE finally was starting to win the ratings against WCW going into early 98. And then, we had iconic moments and characters like Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, #1 actor in Hollywood now, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Triple H. We had the Attitude Era with all bunch of, random characters, and everything from start to finish was perfect.
Absolutely.
And that is exactly what I grew up on. And of course, my cousin, Stash, he was a big wrestling fan because of the Attitude Era. And I saw him playing with the, Jack Pacific, the WWE toys.
Yep.
And he used to watch it and stuff. And that is how I got hooked into this. Was just from seeing my cousin looking like he's having a good time, playing with his toys. And my first action figure I ever got was The Rock. I stole it from him.
You stole it? That's great.
I stole his figure from him, and I still have the figure to this day, too.
Do you really?
Which is pretty cool.
Wow. We're going to have to show that on an episode.
Definitely. But that's the thing. Like, I got into it from the toys, and then I remember, because my mom always loved going to Blockbuster and Hollywood Home Videos. You definitely know that nostalgia.
Oh, yes.
So with me, I would go to Hollywood Home Videos, and I would rent these, VCRs. I would get these old school VCRs, like the Coliseum videos of, like, the 90s with, like, Yokozuna, Lex Luger, Bret the Hitman Hart, Owen Hart. And I used to binge watch it. And the first WrestleMania that really caught my eye, like, that made me become a wrestling fan, was WrestleMania 9.
What a great WrestleMania.
1993. With, the Coliseum. They were in Las Vegas, Nevada. I love the theme of it. I know a lot of old school wrestling fans, like you, probably say that WrestleMania 9 and 10 weren't really the best because you didn't have those big, captivating superstars compared to like, you know, a Macho Man or a Hulk Hogan. But for me, I remember watching those as a young kid, and I was really into it. And of course, my first WrestleMania being born was WrestleMania 14, so I always go back and I watch that, and
Great, yeah.
I absolutely enjoyed it. So for me, I grew up, you know, mostly Attitude Era, Ruthless Aggression, and how I got into it was just watching my cousin.
That's a great story.
He loved watching it, and for me, I just, you know, pretty much tagged along because I wanted to be just like him. And next thing you know, he gets out of the phase of wrestling, and I am addicted.
Yeah, and now look at your figure collection.
And
It's stuck.
And We Are Wrestling channel too. I'm doing a whole YouTube channel on professional wrestling.
Absolutely.
And it's crazy. My cousin actually still does not watch wrestling to this day. He
Wow.
enjoyed it as a kid.
Wow. Man, that's a great story. You talk about the toys. I'll tell you what, Vince, we know Vince is a genius. He knew how to market, and for me, the figures were those big, clumsy WWF superstars, the big rubber figures, you know.
Oh, wait, LJNs?
The LJN, baby. They're terrible. I mean, they're terrible as far as, you know, playing with, because all the paint used to come off, and, you know, it never, but there was just something amazing about them. There was just, even watching commercials for it now, I just get like, there's a special, they did on a few Christmases ago with Conrad Thompson's house.
Was it Major Wrestling Figure Podcast?
Yep. Did you see that?
I did, yeah.
So good. And, you know, they were talking about the different variants of the, you know, with the colors and different things. And it was really so interesting. But just seeing those commercials, because there was nothing like it. I remember the commercial with, they had a show, The Living Room, and it was like the ding, ding, ding. And they had you know, a father and son in the living room. And all of a sudden, you know, Rowdy Piper breaks down the door, and you got Jimmy Snuka flying off the staircase. And it was just incredible, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely. So
I mean,
now, being a wrestling fan for you, it would be what, like 40 years now?
Yeah, 1983, 84 was when it really clicked for me. But yeah, so I'm going to be 47 in a few weeks. And so a few weeks as we're recording this, but I will be I'm 47 now when this comes out. But yeah, so yeah, 44 years. But being a true fan.
That's what I was going to get to was, when did the real addiction for professional wrestling for you begin?
80, 85, 86. I'd say 86. It was really.
So how old were you?
I was 10. I was just about to turn 11. So I'll tell you, Macho Man was, when I saw Macho Man, he used to come off the top rope and do that jump on the outside and do the double axe handle. Nobody ever did moves like that. Ever. I mean, he was the first real, like, character for me. Like, he's my all-time favorite, like, and just the stars and that nostalgic, the pink tights with the yellow boots and the,
oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, baby. And he made that, you know, my favorite championships, the Intercontinental Belt. And just watching him, I remember the match, watching him beat, it was on, I believe it was February 8th, 1986, when he beat Tito Santana for the belt. And, you know, Tito was gonna, you know, back body drop him. He was outside the ropes, and he took out a roll of rolled up quarters, and when Tito picked him up, he just popped him in the face, and then he pinned him. He was, that's just that belt with the red WWF logo. It was so beautiful, so beautiful, and that's another thing we're gonna get into too. Belts. I'm a big belt guy. I know you are.
Oh yeah.
But yeah. But me and my friends used to, we used to trade off with the wrestlers, and we'd put on matches, and I had that big ring that it was so terrible because the wrestlers were so much bigger than the ring, and it was just so funny, but it was the best for us. It was the best, the sling 'em, fling 'em wrestling ring.
I was so lucky that for me, I had the Jack Pacifics figures. So those were perfect to like make custom figures out of, because a lot of the times they didn't look like the wrestler, and you were able to like, pretty much like you were able to move them around perfect in your hands.
Yep.
And like, that's everybody that's a figure, like figure collector, and like, loves to play with the figures, and let them breathe. You've definitely had a fig fed. And for me, I had one, and I gotta say, like, for me, when I got into like wrestling for real, I was probably 6 years old in, 2003. That's like where I mostly have my memory from my childhood, was 2003. I remember, watching, because my dad would always order the pay-per-views for like the big ones at first, like as I was like not really into it that much, but my cousins were on, my dad's side. So like my cousin Trevor, Nick, they would come over, they would watch it. It would be like just Rumbles, Manias. But then I remember in like 2003, like Unforgiven, I started watching that.
Oh.
And then, going to Royal Rumble and like 2004 is where my addiction was, all right, I'm a We Are Wrestling maniac. 2004 with the Royal Rumble that year, and then going to WrestleMania 20 where Chris Benoit beats Shawn Michaels and Triple H in a triple threat match at WrestleMania 20, which was held in the famous arena, Madison Square Garden.
Yes, sir.
And I remember that moment really catching my eye as a viewer, and because I think what they did for that WrestleMania was they brought the nostalgia in there. So as a viewer watching the product, you wanted to go back and see the nostalgia, because of course you had American Badass Undertaker from 2000 to like 2003. So then we had the return of the Dead Man at this Mania.
Yes.
So like you wanted to go back and see those moments. So like they really brought you back, which I really liked about that. And I think that's what really caught my eye, because then, I really got into, the old school stuff with, the 90s and the Attitude Era. I always watched glimpse of it, but now as a maniac, I was friggin' going back and I was friggin' watching all these old pay-per-views. One of them that really stood out to me was King of the Ring 2001, when, Kurt Angle and Shane McMahon had that insane friggin' match where Angle put him right through the glass.
Yes.
And, like, the Ruthless Aggression era is probably, like, where I mostly remember my, my friggin' chaotic maniac, my love for wrestling, because that's when I was, a kid, around, like, from, like, 6 to, like, 10, 12 years old. That was the best shit.
Nice. Absolutely. That's, man. I am loving this, man. This is just, this is just hitting me right in the feels. And you talk about WrestleMania 20, and because it was in Madison Square Garden, and so they did, because it was a anniversary, like they did WrestleMania 10, and of course the first WrestleMania being there, and then like you said, having all that nostalgia they brought back, and it was just very, very cool. I actually went to WrestleMania 11, was in Hartford. I think it was WrestleMania
Hartford, I believe,
Tw-
was WrestleMania.
12.
That was 11, I think.
11. Yes, I was thinking 11 or 12. Yes, 11.
That was the one with Lawrence Taylor versus Bam
yes,
Bam
Lawrence
Bigelow.
Taylor and Bam Bam. Yes.
That was 11.
So, yep. And funny, you said you born in 97. You were born in November 8th.
Yep.
I went for my birthday to December 7th. My birthday is December 3rd. I went December 7th, 1997 to the Springfield Civic Center and watched the Degeneration X In Your House pay-per-view. That, my friend, was incredible.
Wasn't that when Owen Hart debuted, right, as the Black Heart?
That was his debut as the Black Heart. Yep.
How do they fumble that? I can't wait to do an episode on Owen Hart. I cannot wait.
Let me tell you something that you're funny you just said that, because I saw something today. They have a thing. It's called it. Actually, I have it right here on my phone, and we can talk about this later. It's actually about the Blackheart. It says it's the character that got away. It's about different characters that they let get away. The biggest character that got away, the Blackheart.
There was a video actually back then that I think it was about like a month or two ago. I actually watched from this wrestling YouTube channel, Wrestling Bios. If you are a maniac, I recommend you to go over there because this guy does an incredible
Scottish
job doing
yes.
documentaries, and
he's
he
amazing.
actually did something with like a what if Owen Hart is still around, and pretty much like booked it like where like Royal Rumble it was him versus Shawn Michaels, that's what should have happened.
That's exactly what should have happened. Absolutely.
But like we're definitely going to be doing a whole episode on the Hearts eventually on this series.
Yes.
So of course, as a professional wrestling fan, a maniac, you and I probably have been to more shows than the fingers on our hands. And I feel like since we're talking about how we got into professional wrestling, I feel like we need to talk about some of those live events that really stood out to us. Because, of course, it's one thing watching your favorite show on TV, but going to an actual show is a whole nother feeling that you can't really express or explain.
Absolutely.
So, I want to know, Chaz, what are some of, the live events that really, stand out to you? I say, we both can talk about our first live event that we went to, and then, talk about some of our, like, moments that stood out.
All right. Great idea. That's a great idea. I actually remember my first event very, very vividly. It was my Aunt Lori and Uncle Donnie, who actually looked a lot like Macho Man. Everybody used to call it, like, people would be out and everybody thought he was like Macho Man. Like, he looked a lot like Macho Man. Even had that gravelly voice. So, and he was built like him too. So anyways, but they took me and it was June 23rd, 1986.
Wow.
So I was, I was 9 years old. 9 or 10. Springfield Civic Center. And this card, it was amazing. And you know what the coolest memory from that is? I remember, now you've been to the Civic Center and seen shows, a million
so
of them,
many iconic friggin' WWE shows at that Civic Center.
I still remember the first time walking through, how you go through the, where the concessions are and everything.
Yeah.
And you go through the curtain. First time going through that curtain and seeing that ring. I'm getting the butterflies right now, dude. Oh my God, my stomach dropped. It was like, it was cool, because you're so used to seeing it on TV, and it will, oh my God, it was so amazing. It was like, wow. it was just really cool. And so the card was so stacked for, I mean, legends. The card S Special Delivery Jones defeating Rene Goulet, who, you know, who worked for the WWF, became a suit, who was actually subbing for Bret Hart. Cousin Luke, who was, you know, with Hillbilly Jim and them, defeated Mario Mancini. Yeah, Bob Orton Jr., Randy Orton's father, defeating Leaping Lanny Poffo, who is brother of Macho Man.
Yes, I did meet him before.
He's a great guy.
Very
Great,
nice.
super nice guy. Jim Neidhart defeating the son of the great legendary Bruno Sammartino, David Sammartino. The adorable Adrian Adonis defeating George Animal Steel. Pedro Morales defeating Les Thornton. And the WWF Tag Team Champions, the British Bulldogs, Davey Boy Smith, Dynamite Kid, defeating the Dream Team, the original Dream Team of Brutus Beefcake before he was the barber, and Greg the Hammer Valentine. And then, of course, Don Morocco defeating Paul Orndorff, or they wrestled to a double count out. Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff.
You see,
Hall
I feel
of
like the little
Fame
things
city.
like that with the double countouts, like is like something so easy to get out of something
Yeah,
that a lot of, you know, wrestling like companies don't really do anymore.
yeah, yep. It's just, and if it's funny because if you look at these cards from back then, the way their travel schedule was, and then, but it'd be like the same card. They'd wrestle the same night. You know, listening to like Arn Anderson's podcast, they do a whole program like a month with the Rockers and then with the Bushwhackers. And then it was just, you know, that's how it was, because if it didn't, it's funny because they lost every night to the Bushwhackers, but on TV, they were undefeated. So that's why they ended up beating Demolition for the belts. You know, again, if it didn't happen on TV, it didn't happen. So that was my first experience at a house show. Great memories. Loved it. What was your first experience?
So my very first wrestling live event was actually on my birthday, and I did not realize this until like you showed me the website to go on to like look back at the match card and
That
like
is so
how
cool.
everything happened. It was November 8th, 2003.
That's
in
so cool.
Springfield, Mass, I believe at the Civic Center, because
Yep.
that's where, you know, they did all the live events and stuff. And the one match that I remember the most that stood out to me was the main event, which was a steel cage match, Kane versus Shane McMahon. That was my very first, you know, live event show I went to. And on this card, you know, you had a lot of young, ruthless aggression guys. You had the opening match, it was Steven Richards versus Rico. Steven Richards won. Then you had Rene Dupree versus the Hurricane. You had Rene win. This is when they were trying to, you know, make him a single star because he had that tag team run with,
Yep.
you know, I forgot the team name of them. It was him, Rob Conway, and Sylvester.
Yes.
Then, you know, we had the third match, which was, you know, a tag three-way match. You had Val Venus and Lance Storm. They defeated Garrison Cade, Mark Jindrak, Tomko, and this other guy, Kevin. Never heard of him. Match 4, we had Batista defeat Tommy Dreamer. Then we had Trish Stratus and Lita defeat Molly Holly and Gail Kim. Then we had Randy Orton defeat Maven. This is young Randy Orton, too.
Yep.
This was before he won the Intercontinental Championship, I believe. And then we had an elimination match. We had RVD and Booker T. And the Dudley Boys defeat Jericho, Christian, Mark Henry, and Scott Steiner. And Booker T was the sole survivor. Now that we're talking about that, I do remember that match happening. And then we had the cage match and with Shane and Kane, and they absolutely killed it. And I remember that being my first show. I remember going there, and I was absolutely starstruck.
Wow.
Going
Yes.
to the merchandise table, you know, I believe I got a Kane mask at the
Nice.
table. And I remember, getting my first shirt there. Like,
Yep.
it was very nostalgia, and being there live is just absolutely amazing.
Oh.
So after I had a great experience with that, I started going to other wrestling shows. They had more shows at the Civic Center, and the one place that really stands out to me with live events was the Melody Tent in Calayanis, Cape Cod.
Yep.
They had this Melody Tent, and WWE would do shows there. And this was the very first time, I think, as a wrestling fan, I met wrestlers. Because, of course, my dad knew the spot where these wrestlers would arrive. It
Sure.
was very easy if you saw, like, the arena and stuff. I had the opportunity to meet Jonathan Coachman, Teddy Long. I've met Christian as well, Mickey James, my childhood crush. And I met a lot of wrestlers in that, them arriving at the Melody Tent.
That's
But there
very
was
cool.
a time where I actually stopped going to live events for a little bit, and I'll get into that story in a few. But what's probably one of your favorite live event wrestling shows you went to, besides your first one?
Yeah, I mean that's always going to be in my heart, because it was just I was a big huge I had just watched the British Bulldogs, defeat Valentine and Beefcake in WrestleMania 2 for the belts literally 2 months earlier. So, I was a big British Bulldogs fanatic. It's another episode, whole nother episode, tag teams. So another well, actually, I'll tell you right now, one of the absolute best cards, got it right here, was first time I ever got to go. It was after WrestleMania 4, right after WrestleMania 4. It was Saturday night's main event, live at the Springfield Civic Center. It was April 22nd, 1988, in front of 9,000 We Are Wrestling Maniacs.
only if we had 9,000.
No kidding.
We'll get there.
Yes, sir. But just I remember going, and they actually taped 3 shows. It was Saturday night's main event, obviously, but they also did Wrestling Challenge and Superstars also.
Mhm.
And I think they maybe did a few things for primetime. So, and they did some dark matches, whatever. But to see them change this, the banners and the where I was sitting, it was really cool. Remember, when you go to a house show, how they come out, they come out the short way.
Yes.
So for Saturday night's main event, they came out, the long entrance. And this is Saturday. You've seen the old Saturday night's main events with the big old WWF symbol. Oh, so I'm sitting where I'm sitting. I was sitting where the hard cam, across from the hard cam, and Gorilla Monsoon, Jesse Ventura and Vince McMahon were right in front of me. And I could see, it was cool because for the first time being at a house show, I could actually see, because the cameras were all there and they had all the monitors.
Yeah.
And they would show when the match ended, you could actually see, because they were working on the stuff right there. So you know how when you see a match on TV, they show the instant replay?
Yes.
I could actually watch it on the monitors after the match. It was so freaking cool. It was like weird, but it was awesome. But just to walk in and see the production value back then, of the, because of, being on NBC, and it was just so amazing, so incredible. It had Andre the Giant with Bobby Heenan defeating Hacksaw Jim Duggan. This was Macho Man Randy Savage's also his very first title defense on TV
Oh shit.
after WrestleMania 4.
Yeah, because that's when he won the vacated WWF
Yep.
championship,
Yep.
right?
That's when he won the that's when it became the undisputed WWF title. Yep. And so he faced the one man gang, and just awesome matches. He had Demolition versus the British Bulldogs. Who the heck else? Jake the Snake. I had Ravishing Rick Rude versus Jake the Snake. Just some incredible matches. It was so cool. One of the wrestlers wrestled like 4 times. I forgot who it was, but because of the different shows, so it was really weird.
Yeah, because then they tape like multiple shows.
Yeah, they taped the Wrestling Challenge, Superstars, and Saturday Night's Main Event. So it was really weird.
Yeah, like AEW Dynamite and Rampage.
Yeah, yep, exactly.
Nobody
And then
gives a shit about fucking Rampage.
but to see the different, right, exactly, right. But to see the different announcers out there, to see the Fink for the first time, that was pretty cool,
Oh my
and then
god, when he used to like do like the he used to do the ring announcing for
Yeah.
the WWE live events
Yep.
in like, 2003 to like 2006. And that was always awesome.
Oh, he's just there was nobody like Howard Finkel. And that's a whole nother episode. But then I don't know if you remember the female announcer, Mike McGurk.
I do not.
She used to wear she had the big poofy blonde hair, and she used to wear the white or the purple tux, kind of like the long tuxedo jacket.
Mhm.
But she was really good. If you heard her voice, you know who she was. And then they also had but anyways, he's got a really great voice. But it's just cool to see the production value of it, even back then. And I remember I was 13 years old. I went with my friend Louis Marino, my best friend Louis Marino, and I was living in West Springfield at the time. We ended up at it was like almost 1:00 in the morning. We walked home across the West Springfield Bridge to get home, and we got in, and his mother was so pissed.
Well, I'm sure around that time you could have just had your thumb up and get a ride without worrying about getting kidnapped.
Back then, yeah. But
Pretty
you know what?
freaking
We were like,
sad.
we'll just walk. But and we actually, the funny part about it is we couldn't get tickets. We went to the show, and my uncle's friend had a hot dog stand outside of the Civic Center.
Yeah.
He actually had tickets, and he couldn't go because he had to run his thing. And it was like we scored, I mean,
That's pretty cool.
yeah, that's a pretty cool story. Talk about being in the right place at the right time, because I was pretty upset. I was like, you got to be kidding me, But yeah, that's definitely one of the greatest. That and the DX, the DX pay-per-view, because being my first pay-per-view, the WrestleMania, but being the first pay-per-view in Springfield, it was the first pay-per-view ever in the Civic Center.
My first pay-per-view, this is the story that, I'll get into now. My first pay-per-view opportunity, it was New Year's Revolution in 2006 in Albany, New York. And prior to this pay-per-view in January, at the Springfield Civic Center, we had Thursday or Friday night SmackDown at the time. Yep. And this is where Batista and Rey Mysterio won the WWE Tag Team Championships against MNM. And I remember I did not really get to enjoy the show because the pyrotechnics went off to start the show, and I was like right where, the crowd, where you get the high fives and stuff. And the opening match was this jobber versus the Boogeyman. And the Boogeyman comes out, and he, smashes the clock on, his head. Pyrotechnics go off. And I was wearing the John Cena jorts at the time because I always dressed up like John Cena every show I went to. And I got burnt from the pyrotechnic.
Oh yeah.
And it was a very traumatic moment. And then my dad, got the tickets for New Year's Revolution in advance, like already before this traumatic thing happened. So of course, at New Year's Revolution, I tried, but I was so traumatic, like still scared,
Traumatized,
from
absolutely.
fireworks and the pyrotechnics, to where when they went off, I had an anxiety attack and I had to watch the show from the hallway, go back to the hotel. I still have my chair to this day, which is cool, but I missed the opportunity where Edge cashed in his Money in the Bank
Money in the Bank.
contract
Oh.
and won his first WWE championship.
That's
And
got
I
to
didn't
be
go to live events for a couple years because of that.
wow.
And then my ears and my noise, and I started not being as scared anymore. And now, I can go to friggin' any show and have a great time.
Right. Too bad you didn't know about like you could have wore like the gun mufflers,
Yeah, no,
but
I
mean
think
you
it was
wouldn't.
me visually seeing it too, because it
Yeah.
was a very traumatic moment.
Oh, yeah.
And then I tried a WWE live event at the Melody tent where, I was comfortable because there couldn't be pyrotechnics in
Right.
a tent. So I believe this was 2006. At the Melody tent, and the ring was very loud. So I think like loud things really bothered me at this time, because before the pyrotechnics too, as as a young, kid, when I was like, very young, I had a lot of ear issues where I
Yeah.
had to get, I had multiple tubes in my ears where I had to get some taken out, and I had to get procedures on my ears. So I was very sensitive to the noise. And that's why, I took a break from like, I think 2006 to 2009.
Wow.
And that's when
too
I
bad.
first, started going back to wrestling shows.
Yeah, those rings are WWF rings are very, very, very loud.
Yeah.
They're very hard. They're not like the Southern rings, like they call them Southern bumping rings. But you hear a lot of guys from the NWA and the original NWA and or WCW talk about their transition to WWF, WWE. The difference in the rings, first of
Yeah.
all, the ropes are actual rope with electrical tape, and they dip the rope in kerosene, and then the cables, you have cables for rope in WCW, and then they're more springy, the springs dialed back more, so it's got a more of a bounce.
Yeah, so going into my favorite live event, for me, it's a toss-up between this Northeast wrestling show I went to in 2018 in Poughkeepsie, New York with Kenny Omega. He had a 5-star classic against Ray Phoenix, 60-minute match. Darby Allin, before going to AEW, he was on the card. He wrestled Pentagon. And these two weren't really known at the time because, of course, AEW wasn't really around. So, we had a lot of great matches on this card, but I'm going to have to say TNA wrestling live events were different. And probably my favorite wrestling shows I've ever been to.
Really?
Because the way that TNA did their live events, you could, you pay for like your regular ticket, you go in, and then you had Don West, who was one of the commentators, but also did the shop stuff. He was really incredible, like hosting the whole live events, where like he did these brown bag specials where like you get like a random t-shirt and like a DVD and like an autograph for like $20 in this brown bag. And then, there was really cool. Like it was just very unique. And with like the live events, they also did VIP tickets at the show where like my Jeff Jarrett guitar, that's how, there was only 12 Jeff Jarrett guitars at the show. And the first 12 to pay for that guitar gets a backstage pass during intermission, and you get to meet all the guys. And remind you, Kurt Angle is there, AJ Styles, RVD, Bobby Roode, James Storm, even producers like D'Lo Brown was there. So you had the opportunity to meet a bunch of legends and TNA originals, And I think at the TNA live events, they really went way beyond, because you were able to like meet almost everybody, unless you were like Bully Ray, who stayed in character being a heel. Like, you had the option to meet a lot of friggin' the guys you saw, and like they made you feel important, which
That's
was, I
awesome.
think, the favorite, my best thing about going to TNA shows.
Wow, that's a great that's really cool.
And the
That's
six-sided ring, I remember
oh yeah,
2009 going
absolutely.
to my first TNA show, because it was at Wendy's. This is when Wendy's on Cooley Street opened up. They reopened up with like a brand new, look and everything.
Mhm.
And they had this wheel thing going on, and I actually spun the wheel, and I got me, my dad, and my friend free tickets to this TNA show.
Nice.
And I was able to, go into the six-sided ring at the end of the show, take a picture with AJ Styles. And I just remember it being so different. And I think no other wrestling show for me is going to beat TNA.
No, that's very cool. I like how you said that, like they did the brown bag and stuff. That's a really cool idea.
Don West was absolutely brilliant with a lot of the
that's
stuff.
brilliant marketing strategy. They knew what they were doing. Definitely. I just, and the six-sided ring. I mean, that was awesome. I know a lot of people aren't, and listen, I'm an old school fan, and I know a lot of old school fans, traditionalists, are not fans of that ring, but I thought it was cool. I thought it was different.
I loved it.
I know a lot of wrestlers said it was hard to get used to because of you're used to so many steps before a move.
But look how much eyes were on the product.
Yeah, exactly.
Jeff Jarrett said it on his My World podcast. TNA was not getting opportunities to like get video games or action figures, or getting like an actual good television deal like Spike TV.
Right.
Until they did the six-sided ring.
Yeah.
And that is where they were able to finally get, toys, and get merchandise, and get a Spike TV deal, and get guys like Christian Cage, Sting, Kurt Angle, and all of these guys into, TNA.
You got to be different. You got to be, I tell you all the time.
Six-sided ring is what made TNA money.
Gimmicks go over. Gimmicks are what it's about, man. Then that's something that obviously it worked. But you were talking about some independent shows, some of the big time wrestling, and a few that we went to. I gotta say, the most recent, this past June, or last June, last June.
Big time wrestling.
Big time wrestling, man. What, for me, I've met a lot of wrestlers. We both met a lot of wrestlers, but I will tell you, I've already mentioned his name a few times. As you can tell, even though I was a WWF guy, WWE, WWF guy, I was a huge Horseman mark. Okay. And Arn Anderson for me was, the guy was 24 years old, looked like he was 45, but he just had this something. I mean, he wasn't a body guy. He just was a regular working class, but one thing about him in that television title, he made that so amazing. Like, just like Macho Man with the IC belt for me, but getting to meet Arn Anderson was like, when he put his arm around me when we were taking that picture, I was like, and I don't get starstruck very often, but I got to admit, man,
Arn Anderson, he was a little bit of a social butterfly. He was talking everybody's ear off. It was awesome.
Yeah, he that's what. I'm a huge fanatic. I'm a huge fan of his podcast. If you like Arn Anderson, if you liked, the Four Horsemen, or, when he was with the Brainbusters in the WWF, definitely I recommend checking out the Arn show, with, Conrad Thompson does it sometimes, but, it's been mostly, Paul Bromwell, who I'm a huge fan of now. He's awesome.
Yeah.
And, he's always talking about how he's all about the fans. when he talked about the Webster Hall show. He talked about that show a few times. He talked about it before and then after. And he talked about how great the fans were. He's all about the fans. He said he will stay there way after until every person gets an autograph. He said, because if it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be getting.
Something too about big time wrestling as well. If you are an old school maniac like Chaz, definitely recommend big time wrestling, because they do go all over, the US. I recommend going to a big time wrestling show.
Absolutely.
Because it definitely has that old school feel to it.
Yeah.
With the posters and bringing the legends in. I believe, by the time this comes out, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat is going to be having a 6-man tag match.
Yeah.
Teaming with FTR.
Yeah. And we saw FTR. We saw FTR last year.
With Bret Hart as their
Bret the
manager.
Hitman Hart against Arn Anderson's son Brock and Brian Pillman Jr. What an amazing freaking match.
But that's the thing about big time wrestling was with
they
the
put
promotion,
on a great
it's
show.
Very old school and nostalgia. And that's why I say if you are an old school fan, which I'm assuming, some of you We Are Wrestling Maniacs that are watching this listening to this podcast are, definitely recommend you to check out Big Time Wrestling.
I do too.
I believe it's on Fight TV as well.
Yep.
If I'm not mistaken.
Yes, they are. Yep.
Now to close off the first episode of Old School versus New School, I want to, talk to the We Are Wrestling Maniacs and give them a little bit of an idea of what to expect on here and why you and I have decided to do this.
Okay.
So in case you guys don't know, when I first did the We Are Wrestling talk show, it was over on my original channel, Donald's the Best One. And Chaz and I actually both started it by talking about current wrestling news and stuff, because around the time we also were working on a passion project, DITB1, and it's like a competition, show with pretty much the sports entertainment storylines and stuff.
Yeah, it was kind of like professional wrestling meets the MTV's Challenge or Survivor. Yeah.
So Chaz and I, we had a lot of free time on our hands, and we decided to start doing this We Are Wrestling talk show on Donald's the Best One. And then, of course, eventually we decided to move forward and take it off Donald's the Best One, because it really didn't make any sense for it, and it wasn't growing because of that. So we decided to make its own channel. And of course, things happened, and then, we had another co-host, things happened there. And now, obviously with the regular We Are Wrestling talk show, it's me, Ben, and Danny. Yes. And,
you guys are killing it.
We've been talking about this series for over a year now. And for me, I've always said it. I have always wanted to work with Chaz again, because me and him, this was our baby. We created We Are Wrestling, and obviously things have changed. And me and Chaz, we're both very passionate wrestling fans. And we figured, why not do a series talking about new school, me, old school, Chaz? Because something that really, makes this series interesting is the knowledge that's going to be involved here, because I have a lot of knowledge when it comes to all the new stuff. Chaz has a lot of knowledge when it comes to the old stuff.
Absolutely.
And with, the We Are Wrestling talk show and the We Are Wrestling channel growing, I want to continue, to branch out and work on different wrestling podcasts and give you guys some more varieties of it. And I think this old school, new school thing is going to be a banger.
Absolutely. And I'm psyched, and I'm so psyched to be working with you again, buddy. And I think this really went better, even better than I expected it to go. I can feel the passion. I can feel the energy, and I hope you fans feel it too. And because I know I read the comment sections in when I watch the old WWF stuff and all the old wrestling stuff, and I know people are missing old school wrestling, So even the people that are into the newer stuff, and you know, so I know there's a fan base for this show. I know this, you know, the series is going to grow along with We Are Wrestling. And I got to give a shout out to Ben and Danny, you know, and I'm really proud of you guys for what you've done with this channel, because it's just amazing to see how it's grown. Like, and I'm just really proud. I'm really proud
And
to be
I'm very excited
part
to
of
be
it
working
again.
with you again, Chaz. I know, you know, in the past, I've always said on, you know, podcasts and stuff that if, you know, like the consistency and the communication was there, I would always want to work with you again. And I'm glad
Yes.
that me and you now are both on the same page. And Old School
Absolutely.
versus New School is going to be a brand new podcast series here on the We Are Wrestling channel. But I think,
Definitely.
you know, that covers everything with this first episode. But if you guys enjoyed this first episode of Wrestling Old School versus New School, make sure to smash that like button now. If you're not a We Are Wrestling Maniac yet already, subscribe, turn on the post notifications. The links are down in the description below. You can go follow Chaz and I on our social medias and my other YouTube channels. The links are down in the description below. And of course, to all the We Are Wrestling Maniacs out there worldwide, we'll see you next week, because of course you already know, we are taking over.
Taking over.
Peace.
Peace.